Intel's 6700K Skylake CPU is great for gaming and productivity, but is it worth upgrading to the newer 6-core 8700K Coffee Lake CPU? In this video, we'll go through some game benchmarks and CPU tests to show you the performance difference between these two powerful CPUs, both at stock speeds and when overclocked. First, let's cover the important similarities and differences between these two chips. The 6700K is a high-end chip from Intel's 6th generation known as Skylake, while the 8700K is currently the top-end option from the 8th generation known as Coffee Lake. The 6700K has 4 cores and 8 threads, while the 8700K has 50% more, with 6 cores and 12 threads. The 8700K has a slightly lower base clock speed at 3.7 GHz, compared with the 6700K's 4 GHz. But the 8700K has a much faster turbo speed of 4.7 GHz compared to 4.2 GHz. Although as K-series CPUs, both can be overclocked. Both are using the 14nm manufacturing process, the 8700K has a slightly higher TDP, and finally the 8700K also has 50% more cache, or cache depending on where you're from. So how much of a performance difference do these changes make practically? To test this, I've run various benchmarks on 2 different systems with these processors to find out. Both PCs are running Windows 10 with all available updates installed on a Samsung M.2 SSD and have 16GB of DDR4 RAM. The memory speed of the Skylake system was 2133 MHz, while the Coffee Lake one was running at 2666 MHz. So a minor amount of performance increase shown in the 8700K may be due to this platform difference. I've used the exact same EVGA 1080 for the Win2 graphics card in each, while performing the graphical tests. So other than the memory speeds, the primary difference between the two systems is the CPUs. I've tested both CPUs at stock clock speeds, with the 6700K overclocked to 4.7 GHz and the 8700K overclocked to 5.1 GHz. In general, from what I've seen, Coffee Lake seems to overclock higher than previous generations, but in any case, this was as good as I could get from both of them. With all that in mind, let's check out the benchmarks. We'll start with the gaming results, because I'm sure that's what most of you care about. I've tested the latest 1.0 version of PUBG using the replay feature, so the exact same test run was used for every test. We can see that the 8700K is giving us an improved frame rate. However, interestingly, the 1% lows seem to be doing better on it compared to the averages. It's also interesting that even the stock 8700K is beating the overclocked 6700K, so it seems the extra cores might be helping here. I doubt that much of a difference is purely from architectural changes between the 6th and 8th generation. In any case, even at 1080p ultra settings, the 6700K at stock is averaging 90 FPS, sitting close to 60 FPS for the 1% lows, so not really worth the upgrade unless you're playing competitively. The Witcher 3 performed around the same in terms of average FPS on the 6700K, regardless of whether or not it was overclocked, although overclocking does seem to make a small difference to the 1% lows. I found it interesting that the 8700K at stock performed very close to the 6700K in terms of average frame rates, but the overclocked 8700K pulls away from the rest of the pack at all setting levels. Although this was a nice boost, we're still getting good results out of the 6700K. Watch Dogs 2 is a fairly resource-intensive game, so it was nice to see that even at ultra settings, the 6700K was still able to average 60 FPS. The 8700K is giving us quite a big performance boost compared to the 6700K. Even at stock, the 1% lows of the 8700K are above the 6700K averages in most cases. So it appears that those extra cores are actually getting put to work. And once again, the overclocks aren't making too much of a difference at the highest setting levels, as the graphics card becomes more of a bottleneck. In the Rise of the Tomb Raider benchmark, we're getting above 120 FPS on average, even at max settings with the 6700K, with the 8700K giving a small increase, but in general nothing too amazing. The overclock on the 8700K once again seems to be proving more useful than on the 6700K, probably as it's able to go a fair bit higher than the 6700K. Again, with Shadow of War I used the built-in benchmark tool, and we can see the results are scaling in a nice even pattern. However, the actual frame rate difference between the CPUs isn't very much at all, so once again it doesn't seem that the extra 2 cores of the 8700K are making a difference at all here. Ghost Recon is another fairly resource-intensive game. However, it seems to require a lot of GPU horsepower as we're not really seeing any differences between the 4 and 6 core CPUs, especially at the higher setting levels. There's a little boost with the 8700K in the middle of the graph, but not really enough of a jump to go crazy about. In the past, I found Doom to perform fairly similarly regardless of the setting level used, and there's no changes here. There's a little difference between each result as we step up in clock speed, but again, no real discernible difference from the extra cores on the 8700K. The results are so close together that again, there's not a real practical difference here unless you're serious about max FPS, as the overclocked 8700K was able to stay above 120 FPS for the 1% lows. Pretty impressive. As for benchmark tools, I've used 3D Mark to test Firestrike and TimeSpy. And as synthetic tests, they scale much more evenly with additional resources, so nothing too surprising there. I've also run the Heaven and Valley benchmarks from Unigine, and there's much less of a difference between the results, especially in Heaven where it's pretty negligible. In most of these graphical tests, we can see that the 8700K makes a much larger difference at the lower frame rates, as the CPU is doing more work while the GPU just sits around. At the higher setting levels where the GPU is taking on more of the work, there's less of a difference observed between the two CPUs. And if you're gaming with either of these CPUs, there's a pretty good chance you're going to be running a good graphics card too, and using higher settings. So unless the game is able to actually take advantage of more CPU cores, like in Watch Dogs 2, the 8700K isn't really making too much of a performance difference. Just a small little boost from its improved single-core speeds. Now with the games complete, let's take a look at various CPU-specific tests. I've used Handbrake to encode a 4K video file to 1080p and then a separate 1080p video file to 720p, and we can see that the extra cores on the 8700K are really helping out, as it's able to render more frames per second, significantly speeding up the job. The Corona benchmark renders out a scene, and we can see that the overclocked 8700K is completing the task twice as fast as the stock 6700K, and not too far behind even the overclocked 6700K, despite only having 50% more cores. So it goes to show what the additional cores and higher clock speeds can do. I've used VeraCrypt to test the AES encryption and decryption speeds, and there's a noticeable increase with the 8700K, likely owing to those two extra cores. And we can see how well it's overclocking, as again it's almost twice as fast than the 6700K at stock speeds. The 7-zip benchmark was used to demonstrate decompression and compression speeds of both CPUs, and like the VeraCrypt test, we can see that the 8700K's extra CPU cores are making a noticeable performance increase, with the overclocks being icing on the cake. In Cinebench, I've tested both single and multi-core performance. As expected, in the single-core performance, there's not too much of a difference, and the 6700K overclocked is performing quite close to the 8700K at stock, as both would be running at 4.7 GHz here, so the small difference should be due to other improvements between the CPU generations. As expected in the multi-core results, the 8700K steals the show, and when that powerful overclock is applied to all 6 cores, it jumps even further ahead. It's similar in Geekbench 4. The single-core results are fairly close together, especially with the overclocked 6700K and stock 8700K. And then with the multi-core results, the 8700K jumps right up thanks to the extra cores. Again, the same behavior was noted in Passmark 9, slightly better single-core performance between the two, and then multi-core is blown out of the water using the 8700K. Based on the gaming tests, in most cases the 8700K appears to only be a small incremental upgrade unless the game actually takes advantage of the higher core count. For more real-world productivity use cases, however, the extra cores make a noticeable difference and could be worth upgrading to depending on your use case. Although I didn't notice any practical difference while playing the games myself, I did notice the time the 8700K saved me while doing tasks like rendering video, and if you're a professional, time is usually money. If you're already running a 6700K, there's not really a major incentive to upgrade to Coffee Lake, unless you really want to improve your multi-core performance. Those two extra cores make a noticeable difference in multi-core workloads. If you're just gaming though, the difference between the two is fairly small. And again, probably not worth upgrading in most cases, as you'll also need to buy a new motherboard in order to support the Coffee Lake CPU, so that's even more money. If you're looking at buying either of these today from anything older, then I'd definitely suggest getting the 8th generation, unless you can find a good sale on the 6th or 7th generation. But if you're still rocking Intel's 6th generation, you'll probably still be fine for a while to come. So what did you guys think about the differences in performance between the Intel 6700K and 8700K CPUs? Personally, I thought the performance of the 8700K was excellent. It's a beast of an overclocker, and it's awesome to finally have more than 4 cores available on the mainstream Intel platform. So I guess I should be thanking AMD for kicking Intel into gear for that one. Be sure to let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and leave a like on the video if you found the information useful. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for future tech videos like this one.